Got to push the right buttons.
It's glowing red. I think
Yeah,
that's correct.
it's glowing.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Come Over for Dinner. I'm so excited you're joining me today. Today I have a very special guest. Her name is Annie Rench. I'm Beth Hawthorne, your host. I often forget to introduce myself, so today I have remembered. So here I am as well. And today we are going to talk to you about lots of things to do with hospitality, including pairing exercise and nutrition in with those thoughts. So welcome, Annie.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
She has 3 children, ages 9, 11, and 13, a boy and 2 girls. She's married to Gabe Rench. Some of my listeners may be familiar with his name. He has long hosted podcasts on the Fight, Laugh, Feast Network, including the Cross Politics Show and the Water Break Show. Recently, Annie has joined him on the Water Break podcast, and they have started talking about health and fitness from a Christian perspective and what that looks like. So I'm going to let her tell us a little bit more about herself, her background, and the podcast.
Oh, sounds good. Well, thanks again for having me. It's really fun to be here and able to have this conversation with you. I actually, when you reached out to me, I had not seen your podcast before. I think I'd heard your name before, and then I kind of looked at it and I was like, oh, this is a whole podcast about hospitality, which I absolutely love. It's a great topic.
Thank you.
Of course. It's so fun.
It's fun to have different guests from different backgrounds because people have different perspectives.
Totally.
And new recipes and new ideas.
Well, I'm going to say all kinds of stuff that your audience is probably going to be like, what?
What? This is brand new.
This is new. Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Anyways, okay, a little bit about myself. I'll keep it short. I grew up here in Moscow. I'm one of the few, my parents moved here when I was 1. So I'm one of the, I know. And it's so funny because when I was younger and I would say that, everybody was like, boring. We're all that way. But now it's kind of getting rare to meet the OGs, in this town.
So many people have moved.
Totally. Just moved on. Exactly. Yeah, that was a big year. So yeah, my parents moved here when I was 1. I went to high school here, ended up studying sports science at University of Idaho. So, and while I was there, I got into group fitness, then I got into personal training. And really right after college, I got married halfway through college. And then by the time I came out, I was working at a small town gym, doing group fitness, doing personal training, and actually ended up being the head trainer of that gym. I'm still there, North Idaho Athletic Club, right downtown Moscow. So still there right now. But I was head trainer for years. So did some management, hiring, all kinds of stuff. And now I'm still dabbling in all those things. I've gotten a little bit more into nutritional consulting, I guess is a good way to put it here recently, just mostly because I'm noticing there's a really big need for it. As much as I would just like to have people do squats all day because that's my favorite thing, really we got to talk about nutrition. We got to talk about lifestyle, especially women.
You can't do squats in McDonald's.
You can't.
5 days a week.
No, you can't. And if you haven't slept in 10 years, you might not even really need to be doing squats right now. You know what I'm saying? So there's just so much there. So I've noticed there's a need there. But yeah, that brings me all the way up to this point. So we've got 3 kids. You already kind of listed off their ages. We're in a really fun phase of life. We're very busy with this age group and the rodeo that is our life. But that's my life.
That sounds like a wonderful life. Sounds like you are very busy with all good things.
All good things. That's exactly right.
And I do like how you're talking about when you're thinking about exercise, you do have to pair it with nutrition because either way, there is a balance there. So you eat great healthy foods, but you never exercise. We can see the detriments there, but vice versa as well. I remember way back in the day, probably 90s, there was a person who, similar to you, had a background in exercise science, worked at a gym. Maybe he was even the owner of the gym, super into fitness. And he talked about how he and his friends every day after they left the gym, seriously, they went to McDonald's or Burger King or whatever, and protein and there was just very little education about nutrition at all.
Right.
And he was talking about that after he'd come away from that because I don't remember. I think a health problem had come up because
it'll catch
they
you.
had eaten so much fast food and had neglected, the healthier things, vegetables and, things that weren't McDonald's. So,
anything that's not McDonald's.
Right.
The bar is so low. Right.
So there is a balance there. I know on your podcast you have talked about how when you look at exercise and nutrition, you're thinking about longevity and also being able to accomplish the jobs that God has given you in your life. And so it's not necessarily about when you stand in front of a mirror, is it, what do we look like in the mirror or who is complimenting us or whatever. We have different reasons behind it as Christians. We approach it from a different viewpoint. So thinking, most of the listeners on this podcast are going to be women. And so thinking from that perspective, very busy women, I know there's a lot of excuses that come up naturally.
I know,
first of all.
yes.
And one of them would be, I'm way too busy. Like, what are you even saying? I have all these little kids, or, or even if they're older, you're still very busy with maybe taking them to different activities and cooking and cleaning and maybe even working. And so how do you say to someone who says, I'm too busy, I can't add that in? What would your response be?
Oh, that's a great question. I get it. I get that line of thinking, or I hate to even call it an excuse, because it is true. You know what I mean? And I always like to start this conversation by kind of qualifying that. Like, I know these mamas are busy. I never want to look at them and be like, no, you're not. Like, you're just making that up. I mean, moms, and you're right. It's the little years are just a real challenge in their own way. And then you get, and I remember when my kids were really little, I was like, surely I'll be less busy when they can tie their own shoes and when they're going to school. And no, not at all.
It doesn't. I can attest.
Exactly. It possibly even gets more busy. It's just a different kind of busy. But either way, I mean, if you are being a productive Christian mother, you're caring about your household, you're taking care of your kids, you're helping your husband, all those things. That's a full life. And for a lot of these women, their life really does feel like what I like to call a zero-sum game. So when you're like, okay, you're telling me to be more healthy, you're telling me to exercise more, where am I supposed to even fit that in? And I guess, it depends on the situation. And a couple things that I like to just say right off the top is maybe look at nutrition first, simply because we all eat. We have to eat. So it would be more talking about what are some small swaps or small baby steps or small changes we could make with breakfast, with family dinners, with the kind of snack food I buy my family, because you're buying it anyways, right? It's not so much a time thing. It's a little bit of a mental, like where you have to think about it, not be overwhelmed, decide what you're going to do, and then make those changes. And you just got to figure out, in my season, with our budget, in our particular context, what are some very practical things that we could maybe do to move our family towards better health? And I'll just give you a couple examples that I usually start moms with. Is just number one, trying to slowly pull the amount of processed food that you and your family are eating, or that you're leaning on for fast dinners, the chicken nuggies, the mac and cheese. And I don't blame these moms for a second. I mean, they're cheap and the kids will eat it,
right?
And it doesn't go bad on the shelf. I mean, praise the Lord for the chicken nuggets. But, if that's dinner every night,
sure.
A really, I think, doable, goal for you would just be like, okay, we're going to slowly start cutting that back, and we're going to slowly start replacing that with just a protein-centric meal where it's mostly real food. And that right there, honestly, if most Americans just did that, that would solve, it's hard to put a percentage on it, but it would be a pretty high percentage of a lot of our problems. Mm-hmm. So just moving towards a little bit of protein at every meal, pulling away from that processed food, and that it can be a journey. It can be very slow swaps. It's not like you're going to, in one day be like, I did it. I'm all organic. Look at me.
Right.
And again, you may never be 100% everything is homemade from scratch, but we're just talking ratios, just talking ratios. So things like that with the nutrition. The exercise, I normally say, needs to come second, simply because that's something, for the most part, that you would add in. So that can be a little bit harder for these zero-sum game moms, but you can always start with things that are low stress and done at home. So walking, just even a little bit, if you're not in a season where you're on your feet all the time. Some moms, they walk enough around the house. I have clients who
get their steps
they get their steps in. So for some moms, that's not what they need. They actually maybe need to prioritize their sleep more. There might be other lifestyle things that are very doable that they just have to change some habits, get your husband on board, be like, I got to sleep, honey.
Right.
Help me sleep.
Walking is just literally a little jaunt here and a little jaunt there.
Totally.
And there's never any kind of we're raising our heart rate or actually getting our heart working. There's no strengthening. So sometimes you do feel like, well, I walk constantly, but that's not really exercise.
Well, I mean, it is exercise, but maybe not the kind that you really need, right? Mm-hmm. Like where you're actually putting a little bit of load on your body. And I would say, and the reason I said walking in the first place is because it's something that you can do anywhere. It's free. Mm-hmm. You don't need a gym membership for it. And
you can take your kids in a
stroller. And it's low stress, because I do think that moms, especially moms in the really busy seasons of their lives, and we have moms out here with like 8 kids. Yeah. I mean, crazy. I mean,
and it gets you out of the house.
Yeah, it does get you out of the house.
You can do it with a friend.
And you can do it with a friend.
Go to the park.
Yeah, get some sun, get some vitamin D.
Sunshine.
You can kill a lot of birds, right, with walking. And one of the other reasons I really love it is it's low stress on the body. And a lot of these moms their bodies are under a lot of stress. And like you said at the start, like you sound busy, all good things. And it is all good things. And I think for a lot of these moms, it's mostly all good things too. Had a baby, or I'm now coaching my kids' T-ball team, or I'm starting this business on the side, or whatever. They're all good things, but they are
productive things.
They're productive things. It's not necessarily like all stress has to be bad, like a death in the family or a cancer diagnosis.
It can be a good stress.
That could be a good stress, but our body still registers it as stress. And so I think one of the things women need to think about as they're trying to improve their health in that really busy phase of life is what are things that we can do on the nutrition and the exercise side that are low stress, right? So maybe it's not the time to start CrossFit.
That's
for example,
very good point.
Maybe some at-home Pilates if you can't get to the gym. And if you do get to the gym, 30 minutes of just slow, basic strength training. That's what I would recommend for women, especially in that season of life.
Do you have any particular videos or places online that you would recommend? I know before you answer that, I know on your podcast you mentioned micro workouts. Exercise snacks, which I really love the term exercise snacks, where you were talking about really honestly to start, you don't even have to change out of your regular clothes and feel like I'm going to really do a full workout and get all hot and sweaty. Then I have to shower and then I have to change. It can be overwhelming. So I loved that term exercise snacks. And
good.
It really is true. Sometimes if you're going on a brisk walk, that helps, but inside the house, like if you are going to do some strengthening, is there any direction you would have or would give someone to maybe accomplish small steps?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what I call them for the guys? Oh, trigger sessions, right? Because it was like super manly. And I was like, okay, maybe, but I like that you, a woman, you're like, I like exercise snack.
Right. Yeah. They probably didn't. I think it's cute, and they're probably needing the trigger.
I don't know.
Word.
That was my best. Attempt at being like, come on, guys, you can do it. Yeah, the concept of a trigger session is actually, I love it for a billion reasons, and it actually has a lot of really good science behind it, and it's actually quite effective. People just don't really think about it or know about it, and I think one of the reasons it keeps busy people, men and women alike, out of the gym is that we're just like, I don't have time to change my clothes. Get a babysitter, drive all the way to the gym, do the thing, stretch, cool down, drive back, because it really can be a little bit of a, somewhat of a time problem. Mm-hmm. But, and ultimately in a perfect world, if I could get everybody, on a really good whole body strength routine, I mean, either if you have an amazing home gym with all the barbells and dumbbells that you need, that's great. Most people don't have that. So that would require a gym. That would be ideal. But we also have to talk about reality and just starting where we're at, right? And so if you're one of those people who's like, well, I can't do that right now, don't do nothing. One thing that we can do is just starting with your own body weight at home, which is the exercise snack concept we were just talking about. So for example, I actually have my husband doing this right now because he's just exactly what we just talked about. He's like, I'm not going, I don't have any time. And he really doesn't. Mm-hmm. And any spare minute he has, he's going to go spend it with his family. He just isn't going to go, to the gym at 8 p.m. And I don't really blame him for that. So what an exercise snack or a trigger session is just picking a simple functional body weight movement. It could be a body weight squat. It could be a push-up. It could be a pull-up. Those three are really popular, at least for starting. And you just do a max effort, one set randomly throughout your day. And if you're brand new to this stuff, 10 squats might be enough to make you sore. It was for him, right? And you don't change, you don't warm up, you just get out of the shower, you do your 10 squats. And then you're moving through your day. It's right before lunch, you do 10 more squats and you just move on through your day. Maybe you do it again. Maybe you work up to 2, 3, maybe 4, depending on the movement. Little trigger sessions a day. And I mean, using him as an example, he started with 10 sets of 10 push-ups. He's up to 50.
Each time?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, granted, he's a dude, so he's got testosterone on his side, but that is a huge, over 3 months, his little trigger sessions, which take almost
strengthening has taken
big
place.
Big time. And I'd say even more so for women, as much as heavy strength training is phenomenal, a lot of us struggle to even do a couple good push-ups or pull-ups. So there's a lot you can do just at home if you just think outside the box a little bit and don't have that very tempting defeatist mindset of like, well, I don't have an hour in a gym membership and a babysitter, so I can't do anything.
You can do wall push-ups.
You can start on your knees. You can start with wall push-ups. And you can, if you're consistent with these little sets throughout the day, you can see a strength build that's amazing. And I've had several clients utilize this exact strategy for pull-ups because for women, arguably, that's just kind of our nemesis,
That would be my nemesis, for sure.
Every girl, I just don't know very many who are like, I love pull-ups and I'm so good at them. We just don't have, it's just hard, like it's hard for us. But just doing that, I do one. And then, as soon as you're like, I bet I could do 2, you make it 2. And then and then I've had women go from barely being able to do 1 to being able to bang out 10 strict pull-ups just because it's become a regular part of her day, which is really cool.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So that's a really fun little hack just to get your body moving.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think you and I are both on the same page, but there are potentially people out there who are saying, well, that's all good and fine. I could find time in my day, but why is that important? Why is it important for women to do strengthening? Sometimes the conception has been, well, when you think men bodybuilding, which obviously that's strengthening to an extreme.
Right.
But, men are the ones who lift weights. Why are we talking about women lifting weights?
Yes.
I think women definitely tend towards is it aerobic?
Yeah, cardiovascular.
Cardio
100% they do.
So why?
Yeah.
Why is it important that I lift weights?
No, totally. That's a great question. I get it all the time. I feel like it's getting a little better. I've been in this space for like 20 years, and I feel like the first 10 years I was like pulling teeth just to get girls to touch the floor of the, you know what I mean? Like and there's,
I want to get on a bike.
Like exactly. Treadmill. Yeah. And I don't know. I think the reason for that was like the whole generation, like the Jane Fonda generation before us, where it was like low intensity cardio. And if you're holding a weight,
step aerobics.
Exactly. If you're holding a weight, it's pink and it's 3 pounds, or else you will become ginormous. Right. Like that was just
you're look like a man,
like a dude. When the reality is most women could not look like that dude if they tried. If they tried. And no one's trying. They'd have to be taking something big time.
Really bad.
So all the girls who are like seasoned weightlifters, whenever girls say that, they're just kind of like almost annoyed because they're like, you have no idea how hard it is to build muscle. It's actually really hard. There's maybe that 1% genetic exception. But it's very rare. It's very rare. So there's that. And then I think also we've fallen for the kind of metabolic myth that the best way to manage your weight and burn calories, if you will, is to just sweat it out on a spin bike or run it out on a treadmill. When in reality, the key to having a high functioning metabolism all the time, not just when you're working out, but all the time, is lean body mass. So I just like to put that in there because women love that little, if you tell them it'll help them lose weight, they're more likely to do it. Yes, exactly. So just metabolically, ladies. So metabolically speaking, especially long term, the more lean mass you have, the better off you are. Our muscles are really our primary organ for glucose disposal and fatty acid disposal. So that's basically how you're going to burn up all the things that you decide to eat. And that's really good news. It also causes it to be more insulin sensitive, and managing our insulin, especially over the long haul, is very, very important. The stats are like maybe 80%, maybe upwards possibly, of Americans are all insulin insensitive. So, well on their way to being pre-diabetic and diabetic. So caring about our, long-term ability to manage our body's insulin is very, very important. And then just on the strength side, I like to talk about it in the immediate for women. And then also I like women to think ahead, because we're very bad as just a general, I guess all of us Americans, we're very bad at thinking long term. We really like to think about the now. And I get it. I'm guilty of this too. We like to think right now. What do I want now? Like what do I want my body to look like now? What do I care about right now? And we love a quick fix. Who doesn't, right? And we tend to not think long term. But man, in the short term, I will say motherhood, and you said that's probably a good amount of your audience or moms of all ages, I'm sure, but motherhood is a very extreme sport. It is a very extreme sport. It is a whole body, full contact. You don't get any breaks. Nobody cares if you don't feel well.
And you're not wearing pads.
And you're not wearing pads. And I mean, it's an incredibly physical job, and it's full time, and there's really no end in sight, right? And we love it. Like, we're so thankful for it, and He built us for it. But just having the mindset that your physical body, your strength, your ability to avoid injury, your ability to pick up your child, set your child back down without hurting yourself, I mean, just do basic daily tasks. The mindset that, the amount of muscle on your frame and its functionality is not important is actually crazy, because I deal with these young moms or younger moms all the time who stumble into the gym, with all kinds of serious problems. Like, I can't pick up my child. Both my shoulders are out. I haven't rehabbed my core. I've had 5 babies. Now my back hurts all the time. And like I have said to my husband, when mom's out, the whole show stops. I mean,
when mom does not take care of her body or have that thought of, this is important too.
Yeah, it's at least on a radar.
I need to get enough sleep. I need to strengthen it. I need to recover after a pregnancy. Like you're saying,
exactly.
The core muscles a lot of times need to have some focus.
Some serious focus, yes.
If that's let go for years and years and years and years, it does lead to multiple things, like you said.
So many things.
Problems which inhibit you from getting all the work and jobs done
that you want to do. Yeah, and it's good. I think we all want moms to feel good and be healthy, and no one wants, unhealth for mom. And so that's important in itself, but also there's fallout from that, if you're not taking care of yourself. So even in the short term, it's really important for moms right now. And then I just can't say this enough. We need to be thinking long-term, right? If you're 30 and you're like, I'm fine, I feel fine. You're still genetically gifted enough to just sort of get away with things. And
I've been there and done that.
Totally.
And I'm not in my 30s anymore.
I just spin and do some yoga, and that's good enough for me now. And it might be like, you might have been lucky enough at this point to avoid like a slip disc or a rotator cuff going. Not all moms at 30 are lucky enough, but some are. But where are you going to be when you are a grandma and you are in full menopause?
Can you still be an active grandma?
Yeah, can you be a lot of things, right? What is your bone density going to look like? At what level of frailty will you, and that's the actual word that these, researchers and doctors use, is frailty. We want to avoid that, not just, again, for our own, selves, which of course we want that for ourselves. It'd be great to be 65 and feeling great. It'd be great to be 95 and feeling great. But like, do you want to be that kind of grandma who can actually pick their grandkids up, who can go on a hike, who can live alone without hurting yourself? It becomes a huge issue. And I'm telling you, it's never too late. I would never look at a woman who's 70 or 65 who's coming into the gym and they're like, listen, I need to start strength training. I have osteopenia. My hips are hurting. My doctor said I have to do this. And usually they're full of regret. I know I should have started earlier. That's always what they say. It's never too late. And you always start where you're at. But man, if you could go back in time, if I could give young women one piece of advice, work on building muscle and good movement mechanics now so that your lean mass reservoir, when you get to that point, is big, right? And you've got some cushion there, because you can build muscle in menopause, but it does get harder. So building it early before you necessarily even might feel like you need it is a really good idea.
Well, and all the weight bearing and strength training you're talking about build strong bones, which once you hit 40s, 50s.
Especially menopause, right? Menopause, usually 50, what's the average age? 52.
50s.
Yeah, yes.
Then you've missed the prime window to build those strong bones.
That's a really good way to look at it.
Osteoporosis.
Right. You can still do it, but there is definitely a window, and you don't want to squander it. It's just, we need to be thinking ahead.
Well,
we need to be thinking ahead.
I think as busy women, we often think that it's counterproductive. Like I had that thought with my son. My youngest son is 17 now, and he does football and other sports. And one of the big things he does in the morning is conditioning. It's a conditioning class. And you think, well, but he's playing lacrosse in the afternoon, or he's playing football in the afternoon, or the next day, or whatever. Why in the world would he go and wear himself out in a gym for an hour?
Right.
And just be exhausted at the end of it? Shouldn't he save his strength? And, why are we doing conditioning when we're playing sports all the time? Well, if you're not doing the conditioning, you don't have the muscle or the strength or the stamina to do the sport.
Right.
And so it really is preparation for the sport, which that makes sense to us. We're all like, know, anybody in the sports, if you watch any sport at all, or your kids are in any sport at all, you know that, of course, they have to do practice.
Right.
Well, as moms, we don't think that.
No, it's a disconnect. There's a disconnect, isn't there?
It's like, I didn't think about, I need to, have this practice put in, build this strength so that I can have the stamina for the day and have the stamina for raising my family. I just kind of winged it.
Totally. Well, you're really right. You're really right about that. We have weird disconnects. All of us do, where it's like so funny how like in certain areas of our life, we're thinking really clearly. We're thinking long term. We understand, like, that's a wonderful analogy. You train for your sport, right? So that you'll be better at it. And so ideally, so that you won't get hurt. That's a huge part of it, right? Why are we not training for motherhood as the sport that it truly is? I mean,
That is a great analogy.
It's football, rugby. They're all smushed together. Like it's insane. And there's no sub for you. You know what I mean? You don't get to sub out.
You don't get to call the substitute
Not
teacher.
really. Not really. You do not. There's no substitute teacher. There's no teammate that's like, oh, come in. You don't feel well. Like, not really. So yeah, that would be even more reason for us to care about this stuff.
Yes. And it's such a joke, the modern culture that has often said in the past and probably continues to say, stay at home mom is so, looked down upon as if it's like whoever says that has never actually been a stay at home mom.
I mean, if there has been
to the office is a break.
If there's ever been a worse cultural lie,
it's so bad.
That's so objectively obviously not true. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if there has been. It drives me insane. I mean, I can't even. It's the hardest and also probably most fulfilling job that you can ever do. And there's a reason that women are so easily pulled to like, I'm just going to go, I'll put my kids in daycare. I'm just going to go do this or that because it's easier. Like you just said.
I think it would be a fabulous reality TV show to take any of those women who have sat in front of a microphone and decried motherhood and staying at home and all that. And have them for a day, with their list of things that they have to accomplish. It's not Netflix and whatever. They have to accomplish all the things this normal mom would get done. Put them in a house with 5 kids and go. I think I would watch that. I would tune in. I mean, I would like get popcorn and I would watch it. It would be. I'd be crying at the end of it.
I would
like,
too.
Please let me go back.
How has no one made that show yet?
It's like as the women would not agree to it.
Oh, it's true. It's true. You have to get
somewhere deep in their hearts, they know.
They're like, I don't think that's going to end well for me.
This is not going to end well. I'm going to be put in a bad light here.
Exactly. Oh, that's funny.
One other thought before we get off onto menus and food and hospitality. One other thought I had that I also remember you mentioning on your podcast was talking about when you exercise, drinking a lot of water, but also electrolytes.
Yeah.
So why would you recommend electrolytes?
Oh, that's a great question. We actually just... did it drop today? We just did our last podcast was on supplements, and I'm on the minimalist side of supplements. I think a lot of people take away too many and they take a lot of things they don't need, waste a lot of money, et cetera. But there are a few that I think you could probably make a pretty good argument that almost everybody could benefit from, and electrolytes are one of them. And it depends on the person we're talking about. I mean, there's a lot of Americans who don't drink enough water at all, period. So hydration needs to come up. But then you also can have this whole other segment of people who are great about hydration. But the thing you need to know, if you're truly trying to hydrate your cells in your muscles, you need to increase the amount of electrolytes. Probably the most famous one. They're really just minerals in our body that have a bunch of different functions and they carry electrical charge. So some of the more well-known ones are going to be your sodium, your potassium, your magnesium. There's others, but those are the ones that get most of the attention. We need those also. And so if you are just like you're an athlete, for example, or maybe you're working out hard, or maybe you're just doing the mom sport of the intense mom sport of everyday life and you're guzzling water, your water to electrolyte balance can actually get kind of off. And it's really interesting to me. I think we're all depleted for a lot of reasons. Our soil's depleted. If you eat a ton of processed food, which I don't encourage people to do, but if you eat a lot of processed food, you're probably getting a decent amount of sodium because that's actually, interestingly, like the number one source of salt for most Americans is processed food. So if you're eating a steady stream of McDonald's and other heavily processed foods, you probably are getting plenty of sodium. Now, not probably the kind of salt that would be the most healthful. Normally at home when you're cooking, we encourage people to use what we call mineralized salt. So that's like your Redmond's sea salt, your Himalayan salt. And the reason that salt is ideally better is because there's actually a higher mineral content in it, right? You're not really getting that kind of salt in processed food, but your salt's pretty high. You're probably still very deficient though in some of the other electrolytes like potassium, magnesium, things like that. Interestingly though, for the people who are trying to not eat processed, which is what I encourage people to do, eat as much real food as you possibly can, they're usually more electrolyte deficient, specifically salt also, than anyone else simply because that's where most of us get it. So a lot of the healthy people are the people who might need them the most. And again, it helps with energy, it helps with cognitive function, muscle function. So a couple, and I'll just note a couple, I don't want to take over your podcast too much here, but obviously if you're an athlete, or you've got a kid who's an athlete, if they're sweating a lot, if you do sauna a lot, if you're in hot temperatures, you sweat these things out, right? You lose a lot of those minerals with sweat. I think most people know that. So you need to be replacing extra if that's you. Breastfeeding moms. I've read a couple papers on this just recently. recently, and I was kind of kicking myself for not having thought of that myself in the past, because it's such an intense time for a lot of moms. And yet you have, an increased stress on your body and increased metabolic burden to produce all this milk. And so especially for moms who are lower producers who struggle with milk production, try taking a daily electrolyte and see how that helps. Yeah, the science was pretty compelling. And I was also it just makes sense.
Right. You really need to focus on your own nutrition, because you're losing nutrition. You're trying to feed two different people.
You're just replacing everything that you're losing. So I thought that was really interesting. Also, anybody, and this includes most moms, we just talked about it, under a lot of stress. Salt is very, very, it helps basically mitigate too much cortisol. Cortisols are not our only, but our most famous stress hormone. And a lot of moms are just, if you measure their cortisol, it's either through the roof or they're already halfway into, adrenal meltdown, and it's really, really low and it's high at night, which is why they're not sleeping. So adrenal, fatigue is a real thing. Propping up our adrenals is a big deal. And one of the number one symptoms of people in adrenal fatigue is salt cravings, which is really interesting because I think the body knows you need salt. So electrolyte, if you are under any amount of stress, I think that includes most mothers, right? And then lastly, like I said, anyone who's trying to eat low carb or just low processed, you are almost definitely depleted in those electrolytes. If you have a headache disorder, take an electrolyte. If you're a crampy person, if your kids are out on the field and they're like, my hamstrings, get an electrolyte. They really are, you can't really go wrong. It's very, very hard to take too much if you're taking a reasonable dose, and they can just do a lot of good. So yeah, easy way to give your health just a little bit of a nudge.
Let's take a quick break.
Are you searching for hands-on activities to help your kids explore the practical side of science? Look no further than your kitchen. Inquisicook blends food science and culinary arts into an engaging program that puts delicious food on the family table. Let Inquisicook do the teaching with lesson videos, reliable recipes, and assessment tools that put students on track for success. Their online platform is easy to navigate and optimized for mobile, so the learning experience can move from the classroom to the kitchen without a hitch. Inquisicook turns curious students into intuitive cooks, not just recipe followers. Say goodbye to the tyranny of the ingredients list and say hello to utilizing what's in season, what's on sale, or what's in the fridge. Visit inquisicook.com to view sample lessons, then check out the recipe gallery to see just how crave-worthy science can be. What is your favorite way to get electrolytes? Because obviously, if we think about sports players, they push Powerade and Gatorade and all that sort of thing, which has lots of sugars.
Yes.
And then there's packets. Maybe there's even, I know probably individually, maybe there's a combination tablet you could take. I know I've heard of salt tablets and things like that, but if you're talking about a combination,
right?
What is your best advice there?
That's great. I love a capsule. It just, I guess some people are like, I'd rather die than swallow something. But I'm just like, I'd rather have. It's exactly. You just throw it back, you drink your water, and you move on with your day. Because, like you said, a lot of those sports drinks, they have a ton of dye. Some of them have corn syrup in them, a lot of sugar, just a lot of things, additives that you don't necessarily want. So you can either go the little packet that dissolves in water. Some people like that. Some people like their water to have a flavor or have a saltiness to it, and they're more likely to drink their water. If that's the case, that's fine. You're just looking for an electrolyte that doesn't have any nasty fillers. One that's really well known right now is called Element, LMNT. It's pretty popular. The sodium content is really high. I would definitely suggest it for athletes, people who are, under a lot of stress. I would definitely go for that if I was like a breastfeeding mom, because I just think you're probably depleted enough that you really, really need it. If you're being ketogenic, I think it'd be a great choice because you're dumping a lot of salt. If you're going really low carb for a season, it's just really salty and not everybody loves it. It's really interesting. There are these packets, Rob Wolf invented it. They're a little spendy, but they're great quality. It's just the sodium's so high. So it is salty. And about 50% of the people I talk to are like, I can't get enough. And then everyone else is like, I feel like I'm drinking ocean water. So it just kind of depends. And it's just kind of interesting. But you can find, even on Amazon, just capsules, just like Runner Electrolyte. I'm still undecided on what I think the perfect ratio of sodium, potassium, magnesium is. The experts are all like, they all have their own little opinions. But I think one way or another, if you're getting some of each of those, you're going to be ahead of the game. So capsule is capsule or something that you can dump into your water. Just watch for fillers. Watch for a bunch of ingredients that you don't want.
Okay. Good advice. Very good advice. Well, speaking of food and hospitality. We've talked a little bit about nutrition and families, nutrition, the effect on kids. We haven't really gone into that yet, but again, thinking through those issues, what are you putting into your kids' bodies? Is it a full diet of high sugars, processed food? How is this going to affect behavior? Are you setting them up for failure?
Right.
Are you setting them up for good behavior and being able to sit still if you ask them to sit still? All those sorts of things. In your own life, how do you balance, say, that with inviting people in and thinking of their dietary needs or feasts or celebrations, and the fact that maybe you do want a dessert or you do want to have something that you wouldn't normally have every single day of the week?
That's a really good question. And I get asked that a lot. And honestly, it's a journey for me. It's never, I feel like I'll never have arrived, because it really is, you are trying to balance on the health, strictly health side of things. Okay, we want to be eating real food. We want to, I ideally eat as little processed or, high sugar type stuff as possible. But at the same time, God gave all of it to us and we want to enjoy our lives. And you can certainly take that too far. And especially when you bring the entertaining or the having guests over component, we all remember going to that family's house, when we were younger.
Lentil burgers.
For real though. And especially
my mom did make lentil burgers.
Well, so did mine. I think, for real. So did mine. I think that was
real. And it was a family joke for years.
For years. They never let it go. Yeah. You can really scar kids and it's a very formative time. So, but that person's house where it's like, oh gosh, I don't want to go. And your parents are in the car. They're like, you will eat what you're served. You will say thank you. You don't want to be that family. Right. And I feel like, especially for the kids, it's like, oh my gosh. So it's a balance, like you said. And I'm not going to be able to tell you that I have the perfect balance. And that balance probably has to look different for everybody.
Sure.
But I'll tell you at least kind of my thought process and some of the things that we do. Number one, I'll say that at least the paradigm that, my husband and I are trying to have for our own family is, okay, it's not about never eating treats or never eating processed food or never making cookies. That's sad. It's not, sad. That's so sad. Just saying that is sad. So it's not about that, but I think we all tend to think very black and white, either we eat this all the time because it's okay, or we never have it because it's the devil. And I think that kind of black and white thinking is not helpful. Probably in most areas of life, it's not helpful. It's just thinking okay, where on the spectrum are we? How is our health? How are we doing? And which direction do we think we need to shift? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we are just, my goal, and I'm very blessed. I have 3 kids. I have a hardworking husband. He's the breadwinner. I work on the side, but I'm able to just kind of make my own hours, which is a complete privilege. A lot of, I know some moms have to be at work every day, so some of it is situational. So I am very blessed to be able to have the time and the funds to meal plan and mostly buy what I want to buy. So I will say that's a blessing. But for me, I try to just say, hey, what is our regular normal food? And I try to make that as real and whole as I possibly can within reason. And do my kids still get goldfish sometimes because they're going to, attract me? Yeah, and it's okay. But what's our staples? We try to be a lot of meat, a lot of eggs, a lot of veggies, a lot of fruit. And we tried to start that young with our kids so that their taste buds were on board, because that's a whole other thing. Because I talk to a lot of moms too also who are like, well, I want to do that, but my kids won't eat it.
I had a young mom tell me one time years ago, literally the child was probably 2 or 3.
Uh-huh.
My son will only eat Cheetos and drink Dr. Pepper.
Oh.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
That's because that's all you're putting in front of them.
Well, and you
train them.
Yeah.
It's the easiest thing.
It's the easiest thing.
To devour that.
Everyone.
As a kid, it's sugar and Cheetos taste amazing.
MSG and it's a big old dopamine hit.
Yeah. So you're right. Training your children to enjoy real food
yes.
and have their taste buds acclimated to it is
exactly.
so huge.
It's a very big deal.
And it does take a little bit of time.
Yeah. And it's sometimes even, and I'm rabbit trailing, I'll come back to it. But I think in the first year, from the age, I don't know, whenever your kid starts eating solid food, that's for some kids earlier than others, but from when they're 1 to 2, that's when the food battles have to be fought. And I don't mean to say that, but I think every parent knows what I'm talking about.
New tastes are introduced constantly.
Exactly.
They've never tasted anything ever before.
Exactly. Where you have to win just to establish like, hey, if mom puts this on your plate and you're not, you don't need to be a tyrant about it. If it's a lima bean and they hate lima beans, don't give them a whole plate of them. Just give them a few, it's okay.
Eat two.
Exactly. Yeah. But you have to establish that, because it's really insane to me when people are like, my 10-year-old just won't eat that. It's like, well, you're their parent. What happened here? So it takes some hard parenting, which can be very exhausting, because it's a lot easier, like you said, to just give them the mac and cheese because they like it, right? But not only are you not fighting those important battles, which I think are pretty important with food, and they're real clear. So that's nice. Some things with little kids are very muddled. It's like, well, do they understand, or is this right? But with food, it's, you take a bite, please. One green bean. We can do this.
And you're right.
Exactly.
It's nutritious.
Exactly.
You're not doing anything wrong by putting squash on their plate.
You're not doing, you're doing them, and you are. And it's like, please eat one and I will be here all night. You like literally need to be willing to cancel your plans. And for most kids, it only takes a couple times.
Yeah.
There's a couple special kids out there who might fight you for longer, but for the most part, it only takes a couple times. And then you've got that established. And then also, what favors are you doing by allowing them and their taste buds and their brains to be addicted to, a steady diet of processed food that is very addictive? Oh. Do your kids some favors, both in the short term and in the long term, and fight those food battles in a loving, patient way. And so that was a little bit of a rabbit trail.
You're giving them health.
Yes. Yes. It's 100% the right thing to do.
All sorts of things, setting them up for a really great, shining future.
Oh, totally. I mean, the list is so long for why we want to be doing that. So that, in terms of just getting back to what we were talking about, in terms of our regular way of eating, I try to have most of our food, our normal food, our staple food be whole foods. And that can be a journey for some. But we've at least successfully gotten there, and we've tried to bring the kids along with us. So there's much less of like, this is what the adults are eating, but this is what the kids are eating. I've been guilty of that before. And sometimes I think there's a place for it. Like if it's really spicy, or, there can be situations where it's like, I'm not going to make my kid eat this like sriracha, whatever, and scar them for life. But generally speaking, we all just eat the same stuff. And so it's just assumed, and that is helpful too. And then we can bring in the concept of what I like to call the feast foods. I don't really like to, if someone's asking me like, do you think Doritos are healthful? I'll be like, well, not really, but I don't really love categorizing food as bad versus good. I kind of just like to look at it like, okay, there's some that are going to benefit your body more than others. There's some that I would argue should probably be eaten more often than others, but we're designed to feast. And I think it's great to just think about these are treats, these are feast foods, and that's fine. So a lot of the time we do our entertaining, and we make that a feast meal, but within reason. So I still try, even when I entertain, to cook as much real food as possible, because I genuinely want to share that with other people. And I think it's the best food. Like, and I love that.
You can make it taste really good.
You can make it taste really good. And it's not that hard if you don't, you learn how to cook your meat correctly. You don't under season. That's a big one. You need to use salt. Stop it with the not salting. This is why your kids hate vegetables, you guys. You don't put any salt on them.
No flavor.
Oh my gosh, no flavor. Exactly.
Salt is God's gift to man.
Please use it. Yeah, we just talked about electrolytes. You probably need it. Just do it. Usually I do meat and a vegetable, but if we're going to have bread, that's when we'll have it. If we're going to have dessert, that's when we're going to have it. And you better bet it's not going to be some disgusting like fake, there's no sugar in this. There's lentils in it. I can see them.
Fruit. You may have a berry.
You may have exactly. We're just going to have
slice
it.
Of apple. It's sweet.
It's sweet that you say it's dessert. Tell yourselves it's dessert. No, I'm not going to do that. We'll make it a feast, and that's completely fine. And it's fun and it's special because we don't do it all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. If you had dessert every single night, every night of the week, it would not be special.
It's not special, and I think that's one thing that Christians sometimes can get wrong, because I love the emphasis on the feasting and the celebrating, and I love the idea of the Sabbath in particular just being this huge party. And I think that's right on the money and biblical. But if you're acting like it's the Sabbath feast-wise almost every day, it's not so much. It's not as special. It's not something to look forward to, And I think that, God, everything that you see in the Bible, even though there's no direct like eat this, not I mean, I guess in the Old Testament there is, but it's not, maybe you don't get specific nutritional information, but a lot of the themes really resonate true all of the time. And the fact that you work for, the whole week and you rest and you feast one day a week, that would work for a lot of people. But I think a lot of us are actually eating feasty foods all week long, right? And so it's just not so much that they're wrong or they're bad, but our balance is a little bit off. So anyways, that was a rabbit trail too.
No, it's a great rabbit trail. In fact, another rabbit trail, I recently took a trip to the South, and it's funny, in Sam's Club, they only ever had the quart of cream, and now it's a half gallon, which Costco has a half gallon.
Yes.
But I needed a half gallon of cream. And what was really funny, the friends I was staying with, through the course of my, being in and out over a couple of weeks, I traveled to other places too, but landed at their house a couple of times, did cooking for big family events. I used that entire half gallon of cream.
It was gone.
It was gone. I made this amazing cake that used quite a bit of the cream for a chocolate whipped cream and a ganache and a mousse.
Oh, it sounds
good. This layer
good.
cake. It was so good. There were multiple recipes that had cream. And so it really was a joke. But it actually is an example of exactly what you're saying. While I was there, I was cooking for big family meals. The cake was for a Sunday lunch. It was celebration. It was celebratory. If I was grabbing a half gallon of cream every time I went to the store,
right,
not only would I not feel good, my clothes wouldn't fit.
It would be right, or just, if you were eating that cake, it wouldn't be special.
Exactly.
No. And I think that was part of God's design is you feast sometimes.
Yes, sometimes.
But not all the time, every day. And really, Gabe and I talk about this all the time. It's a newer problem for us, because really we're living in this crazy time.
Such a rich environment.
Yes. Yeah. Of just overabundance, I guess. And I say that in
very wealthy.
We're very wealthy. And if you even just add in the new, in terms of looking at human history, just refrigeration and what that's done, just in terms of the kind of food that we could eat every single day if we wanted to. Whereas just not even that long ago, 100 years ago, you couldn't eat that. You just couldn't, you would eat honey when you found it. You didn't get to have it every single day. You couldn't eat a ribeye every day. You couldn't eat ice cream every day. But now we can. So it's a new problem that we're having to figure out how to kind of grapple with, because again, you can take it too far.
Yes.
And you can act like a nut job. And we all know those people, but also it's just like, okay, things are available to us all the time, shelf stable and all these things. It's just a new problem, and we got to figure out that balance for ourselves.
If you ever feel like you're deprived, go read Little House on the Prairie books.
Oh my gosh,
the one that we're currently in.
Yes,
Pa had to leave because the grasshoppers ate all the crops, and he had to walk for hundreds of miles to go find work to send money back to the family. But before he left, I think, unless I'm getting the stories mixed up, I think that there was still some parsnips under the ground. And so to prepare for winter, they dug all these parsnips. I was thinking to myself, how many parsnips did they have to eat that winter?
Oh my gosh.
They stored them, mashed them, boiled them.
Yeah, how many different ways can you eat a parsnip?
How many different ways did they do parsnips over and over and over? And maybe they had some potatoes too, but like you're saying, it was just to survive. And
a completely different world.
Totally different world. When he came back with money, and they went to town and bought some flour and beans and white sugar. And of course, that was very, very special and limited. And, they got a piece of candy a couple of times a year. And it's just, and they were so thankful.
And they were so thankful.
Amazed, and it was wonderful. And
sometimes
when we look at ourselves as being deprived in some way,
oh my goodness,
whatever,
I know.
It's like, well, maybe we need a perspective shift here.
Oh my God. Or your kids every 30 minutes, I'm hungry.
I need a snack.
Speaking
of snacks, we need to bring up that point.
Let's talk about it.
Another point that you talked about, when kids don't want to eat the food, the real food that you put in front of them. That is a struggle that a lot of moms have.
Yes.
Is that feeding kids, besides picky eaters and taste buds that need to develop, too many snacks.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, you've been listening, so you know my thoughts. And it's extra close to my heart because I've totally been there. And I am there as a mom, but especially when my kids were little, I used to just have this, I don't know, you become a mom and then everything changes, your whole world changes, your priorities change. And even as far as I can tell, you have a whole huge hormonal shift because the things that you start caring about and wanting to do, you've just never experienced that before. So I used to have this terrible habit of just thinking, if my kids, even just considering or thinking about the idea of my kids at any point in time, on a car ride that will be 5 minutes, what if they're hungry? Mm-hmm. What if we're in the middle of church, which is not that long, and one of my kids is like, I'm hungry. That, to me, I was
You're a bad mom.
I'm a bad mom.
Put something in their mouth.
I need to fix that problem. And so and my husband would just tease me to death. And I deserved it. I just would be my purse would just be full of snacks. And I was being so irrational. I wasn't even thinking, okay, like, Annie, why are you doing this? They're not actually starving. They've never actually experienced real hunger, I don't think. I mean, I don't know.
There's no hunger pains.
There's
in
literally
their life.
there's food everywhere. Like, why are you being so weird? But maybe I was a little extreme, but I think a lot of moms kind of could resonate to this, at least to some degree, is just this compulsive need and want to feed your kids and give. A lot of that comes down to snacks because they like snacks. Some of it, I think, is because the snack food industry. Oh, I'm so sorry. That is okay. That is my alarm. Time to wake up. I think the snack food industry, I mean, just like all processed food, they've done a really good job making very, very highly processed, high dopamine, hit food. So part of it is just the kind of food. Like, I want that granola bar. I want those Cheetos. I want this. And I think the other part about it is that they're not eating enough at their meals and they're not eating enough protein at their meals. So and then you get this terrible vicious cycle of a kid who's like, they don't eat their eggs at breakfast. You didn't enforce it. You didn't make them. And so they just eat some toast and then their blood sugar comes up and then it crashes down. And at 10 a.m. they're like, I'm starving. And then they eat some sort of snacky, whatever, probably not a great snack. And then by lunchtime, because they just had a snack, not hungry again, and it's just this vicious cycle where they're actually eating more in between meals than they are actually eating at meals.
Eating snacks for their day.
Totally. Their whole day, it's a grazing lifestyle. And, kids can maybe get away with that a little more simply because they're growing. And I think we do need to factor that in. They are genuinely at phases in their life very hungry. My 9-year-old son right now has, I swear to you, a hollow leg. I cannot get enough food into that kid. And I'm talking good food. Like, he'll pound 3 cheese sticks, an avocado, a bunch of deli meat, like whatever. I mean, that's how you know they're hungry, is when they'll eat that kind of food. Right. That's when you know.
Like, okay, he's serious.
It's like, okay, you're serious. It's a different kind of hunger where they're like, I want dessert. And you're like, well, you need to finish your dinner. And they're like, well, I'm not hungry for dinner. Mm-hmm. That's different. That's, I have a sweet tooth, or, that's a different problem. But yeah, so all that said, I think we need to slowly start. Okay, number one, moms, evaluate why you're constantly feeding your kids, especially if it's junk food, especially if it's like donuts from the store or Pop-Tart, the stuff that's cheap, that's easy. Because I think a lot of times moms feed their kids that stuff because it makes us feel good. There's just some sort of weird mom dopamine connection there, I think, where it's like, it makes me feel like I'm being a good mom. I mean, are you really?
Well, you're giving them a treat that makes them happy.
Exactly. And I think it's just built into moms to want to do that. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but the way you do it, why you do it, I think matters. And how often you do it does matter. And a lot of kids right now, their energy is terrible. They have a horrible time sitting still. A lot of them they can't sleep. We're seeing skin conditions, constipation. I mean, all these things, which is 100% connected to a lot of the things that they're being fed. So just think about that as a mom. Like, why are you doing this? Are you just trying to make yourself feel better, or do you actually think you're blessing your children? And of course, you can make cookies for your kids. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're doing that kind of thing all the time, I think it's good for us to assess that. And then on the kids side of things, I think generally speaking, just moving slowly towards less snacking in general is a very good idea. And if you are going to do snacks, pick snacks that are like whole foods. So your cheese sticks, your meat sticks, a good quality nut butter and an apple slice. You'll find that if your kids are eating more protein at their actual meals, they'll need to snack less. And then if they do need a snack, you can offer those sorts of snacks and you'll be able to differentiate between I just want sugar and I'm really hungry. Like I just described, my 9-year-old son right now would eat all of those things, like all of them.
All of them.
Yeah, because he's genuinely hungry. So a lot of different things going on the snack, in the snack category.
And watching your kids to see what effects is it having on the kid. Because you think, well, kids can eat anything.
Yes.
But as an adult, if you think about if you ate, I don't know, just let's say tons of sugar. Let's say you ate 5 cookies. How would you feel? Or if you drank an espresso right before bed, caffeine affects you.
Yes.
Well, for some people it doesn't, but for me, if I drank an espresso
a lot of people,
right before bed,
a lot of people,
or had too much sugar,
yes,
I would not be able to sleep well.
Oh,
or
yeah.
if I had too much of something continually,
yes,
I would feel bad.
Yes.
And my stomach would hurt. So when you think about that for kids, sometimes you put something what you consider healthy, like a yogurt, in front of him. But if you're picking most of the yogurts off of the shelf, then you're really putting a dessert in front of him.
It's like a room temperature ice cream.
They're loaded.
So, yeah.
It's not that that's bad occasionally, but if you're doing a granola bar and then a yogurt and then a cookie and, all of a sudden they have so much sugar in for a little tiny body, some kids can blow it off and then other kids it has a really dramatic effect. And so kids in the same family can have I had 4 children before number 5 came along. I can do math.
You got it. you nailed
guys.
it.
I nailed it. And I did the basic mom things of thinking like, we're not going to do much sugar for bed or whatever.
Right.
Never noticed like we had fellowship meals or went to people's houses or whatever. I didn't really monitor the sugar intake.
Right.
If they were offered something, it's totally fine. Number 5 came along. I was like, why is he bouncing off the wall?
What is he doing?
From a small amount of sugar. So we had to recognize with him, it's still okay.
Right.
But, like you're saying, on certain times or feast times or we're at somebody's house or it's a fellowship dinner at church. But we had to start recognizing for him, sugar affects him dramatically. It really does.
Yes.
A small amount. I mean, he could be the one to eat the sugar if he was crashing and just go on the grand stage and put on the biggest performance you ever saw in your life.
Isn't that so funny?
But he also, of course, his young ones, they lack control. So you're not setting them up to be able to have good self-control and obey you.
Right.
And that was a problem we ran into with him. It's like we're asking him for self-control and yet we're not giving it to him. We're not giving them tools.
Setting him up for failure.
Recognizing this is a problem.
Oh, I think that's so true. I think that's true of a lot of like elementary age kids. Especially if you're sending us, like we send our kids to Logos and, the standard for behavior is really high. And I really like that. I mean, I think especially for the little boys, because it just tends to come a little harder to them to sit still, to focus, all those things. If you look at some of those kids' breakfasts and lunches every day, and it's something to think about, moms, how are we working to set our children up for as much success as possible? Because food really is very impactful. I mean, either for good or for ill, it's pretty impactful. So it is really good to think about that. And you're absolutely right. I have one daughter who we've connected many things. For her, it's more like things like constipation, skin rashes, things like that are completely tied to dyes and certain just cheap processed carbs. You take them out and it's gone.
Wow.
I mean, it's crazy. And kids don't always make that connection also.
No, they're not. And
so parents need to do that. We have to do that for them.
Parents should have education. A lot of parents don't.
Yeah.
And they weren't raised. They continue how they were raised.
Totally.
And it really is just a lack of information. And of course, kids don't have that information.
No, they're just going to eat what tastes good,
whatever is delicious in front of them.
Right,
My kids went to a school with, all kinds of lunches came, very healthy lunches, but there was one kid who had a chocolate bacon sandwich every single day.
Chocolate and bacon in the sandwich?
In the sandwich. I think it was probably Nutella and then
with
some bacon in the middle. And I really was like, what? And then his snacks were just all the fruit gushers and fruit roll-ups and, it was just.
Oh, no.
And my kids came home, because our family was similar to yours, where occasionally they got little things.
Sure, right.
We tried to send whole food lunches, good things to eat.
Right, good.
And they would come home telling these tales with big eyes, and I helped with lunch duty up there sometimes, and I saw it, and I just remember thinking, oh, the poor kid.
He's got to feel terrible.
Zero nutrition. Absolutely zero. Yeah. And his poor mom probably did not know. She probably had not been educated to know that really you're not helping your child with ability to focus in school and learn and feel good, grow correctly.
Right. They're growing. They're developing, right?
And the other super shocking story that was really funny, one girl, she had her mom who, again, the mom was probably thinking she was blessing her child and this was a treat and this was fun for her to show up every day with a Happy Meal.
Oh, yeah, every day.
It was every day.
Yeah.
I think every day without fail.
Yeah.
And one of my boys came home from school one day just in shock and horror that the girl had gotten the lunch for mom. Mom had left, and she immediately went and threw her fries in the trash can.
Yeah.
And she didn't even want her lunch.
She didn't want it.
So she just was done with it.
Right.
She probably had a few, maybe it was after she sat down and ate. Maybe she ate like half her sandwich. Anyway, she threw most of her stuff in the trash can, and they were just like looking at these McDonald's fries.
Right. Like, we never, it's such a treat.
This is a treat.
And she's just like, this is old
news.
Like,
we go on our birthday.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that funny? Some of it, I think, is just education, like you said. And I don't, I totally get it. You know what you know. And I think most moms, they're trying, and like you said, also a lot of what your quote unquote normal is just the way you were raised. Right. And so sometimes it's a huge paradigm shift, a hard one to move away from that kind of food and into like more real food. But it is very tempting, I think, even if you are educated, to just treat kids like little garbage disposals. because maybe they won't get as fat as like maybe
you don't notice it on kids most of the time, unless they're genetically disposed.
Totally. You might not see it, although childhood obesity in America is on the rise. So even if we can do that to kids, it's like, this is really bad. But I mean, generally speaking, it might not make your kid fat, but like, it's still, I mean, their little bodies, like we just talked about. I mean, they're supposed to be developing. They're supposed to be growing. There's all these cognitive things. And you're also, again, trying to think long term on not just on your behalf, but for your children.
Setting them up for healthy
habits. Healthy habits, the kind of food that they're used to, their taste buds, all of it. Because then that kid, when they're 35, comes and finds me and trying to break those habits, because by then, a diet of that for 35 years will do some damage. It'll do metabolic damage. It can do all kinds of things. Usually you have a weight problem by then. And trying to break those habits when you're an adult is incredibly hard.
Well, and
it's incredibly
a lot of
hard.
Those ingredients have some addicting factors
very much
to
so.
them. And so you do crave those. If you try to go away from Ruffles and Cheetos and Doritos, when that's what you've had every day for 35 years, that's pretty tough.
It's really tough.
It's a really hard thing to say, okay, only on Sundays am I going to eat my chips,
It's
and have
really
real
hard
food the rest of the week. Then it feels like the real food, which is such a blessing. It feels like it's almost a punishment.
Right.
Because they haven't developed the taste for it.
They haven't developed the taste for it. So do yourself a favor, do your kids a favor, and just set them up for success early on. Do it.
And small changes. If this isn't where you are and you're thinking, oh, this is too overwhelming, definitely small changes.
Yes.
Make a little change. And I think you mentioned this earlier when we were talking, just do things that would be small habits, small changes in your life to
small
overall
swaps.
Build to a healthier future.
Yep. That's well said.
Next week, Annie and I continue our conversation. She shares a delicious menu that she serves when company comes over. We talk about hospitality and the ways that she makes people feel welcome when they come into her home, and gives us lots of tips. And she has a story you don't want to miss. Until next time.